breastfeeding, so the suppression of lactation?
So we have women who gave birth and didn't breastfeed.
Right, but the curves with the number of births increasing, you were just looking at ever never breastfeeding, right? So the more births she's had, even if she's a breastfeeder,
Right.
The probability that for at least one of those she didn't
Right.
actually lactate. And I'm wondering if maybe the failure to lactate itself may be causally related.
Yeah. Interesting, because I think what you're saying is that actually the ones who have more births have a higher chance of having that bad biologic thing happen because they had 4 chances to not breastfeed.
Right.
We didn't really look at it that way. You know, we did look within births, but I wasn't thinking of that at the time. I was kind of thinking the reverse. So I'm going to go back and, you know, do some more analyses to try to get at that. Yeah. Charlie?
Julie, thanks so much. Aside from, how did you decide what to adjust for? Just kidding.
Actually, I'm happy to talk about
That's okay.
it. We talked about it a lot, but...
Wanted to follow. So there's intervals, whether they included them or not too. I wanted to follow up ask a question that is one of the many I never got a chance to ask Bob. And I think it's a little bit of a follow-up to Claire's question. Is there a relationship between parity and breastfeeding? I guess one thing would be if you have information on each pregnancy and the breastfeeding in it, you'd really be able to get at some of Claire's questions then. But are breastfeeding and parity associated? Is there a tendency to be more likely to breastfeed with each increasing pregnancy, or less likely? And if so, is that thought to be causal, or just a function of other things like primarily age, I guess?
I saw Ellen here somewhere. Oh, she just left.
I was looking at.
Oh, well, that's too bad, because Ellen Chetwynd, who's a doctoral student in maternal child health here, is a lactation specialist who's done who's doing research, and she might have been able to answer that question. I don't know the answer to the question. I believe, Mary Beth, do you know, I think CBCS asked about breastfeeding for each birth. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And so Black Women's Health Study hadn't, but in our second to most recent questionnaire, we added an optional piece that asked them to go back for every pregnancy and answer a bunch of questions. So we will have that. And so we can put together looking more of that. And I don't know, does anyone else here know the answer to the question about, I think part of that question is, are women more likely to, if they don't breastfeed their first child, are they more likely to just never breastfeed, or does it, do they possibly start with any child? Do you know, Mara?
Because there's trends in whether it's fashionable or not to breastfeed.
Right.
And so there's certain generations where it was more fashionable to have lots of children but not to breastfeed. And then there were certain factions of that where they breastfed every child. It's almost like you have a decision, I'm going to breastfeed no matter how many children I have, I'm going to breastfeed. So it's almost like it's a social construct of whether you believe in breastfeeding. And that has to do with the cohort of that. But we can check that out on that. I'm looking at
Yes.
On what she was saying, it's experience related. If with the first child, it's been shown if you have a bad experience, even if you previously believed in breastfeeding, had difficulty with ducts, if you deal with it, likely with the second child to more adamantly go towards and really push for breastfeeding. It's been shown in some small research, or even just amongst from breastfeeding mom groups. That's the experience. Have a negative about it. So you're not so keen on it the second and subsequent births, and so it's not pushed as hard if there. So that might be interesting too, to look at relationship of prior experience with breastfeeding in terms of whether they then go on with subsequent births to breastfeed further.
The reason I asked was because it could be that things that affect parity and that affect breastfeeding might be of interest. And if parity actually affects breastfeeding causally, then you have the issue, trying to stratify by an intermediate, mediator.
Yeah.
So but I don't know enough,
Yeah, it's
obviously, about
really
this.
hard to think about that affect both parity and breastfeeding. But Ellen, whom I mentioned, has just been approved to do her entire doctoral thesis using Black Women's Health Study data. And so one of the things she's going to look at is she's going to look at breastfeeding in relation to 2 metabolic outcomes, which is something we had in mind to do all along. And she'll be great doing that. But the other one is also really interesting, which is looking at whether having diabetes or hypertension affects likelihood of breastfeeding and also duration of breastfeeding. But I, don't think those are necessarily related to parity and all that. But it's, those are good points.
Let me add, yes, everyone here Black Women's Health Study. We use it as one of the principal examples, a good example. The bad examples come from other schools.
Actually, one more question. One of your slides for ER-negative breast cancer, and it was I think I saw that there was an increased rate of ER-negative breast cancer. So it went down, and then it was higher for 2, went down for 3, and then rose up again for 4+ births. Why do you think it might have dipped down? Do you have any ideas about why it might have dipped down lower for 3 births and then again?
I assume that's just variation.
Just variation.
No, our numbers are not that big, and I don't think I think people report the number of births pretty well, so I don't think it's that. I think, maybe if we, and also biologically things are different, and, I don't think it's.
3 is not the magic number.
Yes.
Your last question?
Have you seen changes with obesity, with increasing parity or numbers of birth, like with weight retention,
Well, we're seeing in our study, because we did look at that early on, we were more looking at weight gain, and we saw, as others have seen, that the biggest weight gain happens with the first birth, which may be part of the reason that Black women put on most of their excess weight in the 20s, a decade earlier than white women in this country. And then with each child, there's some more weight gain, but it's mostly with the first birth, way more than the other births. But I don't know about weight loss, because not many people lose weight over time.
I mean, weight retention.
Weight retention.
Weight gain and weight loss.
Weight retention, loss after having a baby. We've looked at it in relation to lactation, and it seems that women who breastfeed for 12 months or longer, over a long time, like 4 or 8 years later, they actually have less weight gain. So they do better. In the first 2 years, there's more weight gain. And that they see the beneficial effect more among the women who were not overweight to begin with. All right.
Thank Julie again. It's really good. I will delete it.
Well, it's always good to get a few suggestions from people.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, it's always good to have Claire around
I know.
because she's